Well, let's look at a breakdown of this expenditure framework, what the Senate revised and what was proposed by the executive. Now, some of these things were adjusted owing to, as they say, to global geopolitical tensions. As the crude oil benchmark was adjusted, the benchmark was put at, the Senate approved finally is $60 per barrel, while what the government proposed was $64.85 per barrel. Now, in 2027, remember this document is to cover 2026 to 2028. But in 2027, the government proposed $64.3 per barrel, but the Senate revised it to $65 per barrel. For 2028, the government, the executive, proposed $65.50 per barrel, but the Senate adjusted it to $70 per barrel. Now, that's for the crude oil benchmark. Now, going on down to the crude oil production, for 2026, it was left at 1.84 million barrels per day. The exchange rate was set at $1,512 naira to the dollar, and the inflation rate was set at 16.5%. GDP growth rate was set at 4.68%. Now, there were a few adjustments. For 2027, the crude oil production was set at 1.88 million barrels per day. Exchange rate was set at 1,432.15 naira to the dollar. Inflation was dropped to 13%, and GDP growth rate was put at 5.96%. In 2028, again, there are a few more adjustments. Brent production was put at 1.92 million barrels per day. Exchange rate was dropped further to 1,383.18 naira to the dollar. Inflation rate was dropped further to 9%, and the GDP growth rate was set at 7.9%. There are a lot of other breakdowns. The fiscal framework, the numbers, the government 2026 federal budget snapshot, total proposed expenditure was put at 54.46 trillion naira. Now, in the area of revenue, retained revenue and deficit, retained revenue was 33.33 trillion naira, and fiscal deficit was put at 20.13 trillion, and new borrowings were set at 17.88 trillion naira. But in terms of expenditure breakdown, we see 20.131 trillion naira. Recurrent for capital, recurrent was put at 15.265 trillion, and debt servicing was put at 15.52 trillion. Statutory transfers 3.152, pensions and gratuities were put at 1.376 trillion naira, and sinking fund was put at 388.54 billion naira. Special interventions, recurrent was put at 200 billion, and capital was put at 14 billion naira. This is all a breakdown, but we do have in the studio to help us make sense of all of these figures an economist and the Vice President of the Irish Nigeria Business Association, Mr. Aliyu Audu. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
When we look at this document, you see the adjustments that the Senate had made to, for instance, the benchmark, the oil benchmark, price benchmark at what government proposing 64.85 and Senate revising that to 60. They did a few other adjustments. From your perspective, was that a good decision to have made?
Absolutely, that's a good decision because of the volatility in the oil sector. Now, there's always the possibility that there could be an increase as well as a reduction. So, putting it at 64, I think would be too ambitious by the government. And in order to be safe, I think 60 was the right place for the
benchmark to be placed.
For the benchmark to be placed at, looking at historical figures, of course. Thank you.
But if you, knowing that there's a lot of tension across, political tensions and border tensions across the world, especially in security, I didn't want to use the word security,
fine.
Especially when it comes to the oil producing nations.
Yes.
One would wonder that if the benchmark was reduced, why leave the production target at that same number?
Well, that is also a mistake because now, given the level of insecurities that can happen and a lot of volatility in oil production, like what is going on right now in terms of Dangote and yes, and so on and so forth, I think is a bit too ambitious to leave it at 1.8, because usually there are volatilities that could be caused as a result of political tensions, insecurity, so on and so forth. So I think I think they should play safe, and they should have possibly lowered it to about 1.6 to be on the safe side.
But you see, from what the lawmakers have said, it looks as if everything around Nigeria's economy, especially as it has to do with the oil and gas sector, is, well, dependent on what goes on in the international space. Because they cited global events, particularly situations in the Middle East and Europe, as the reasons for these adjustments. So one would then wonder, at what point would Nigeria begin to plan its economy, expenditure and revenue and all of that around what it can manage? Does Nigeria continue to depend? Should Nigeria continue to depend on
international shocks?
Yes.
Well, it's not entirely true, because they have to make allowance for local shocks. Anything can happen within the Nigerian economy, and especially, as I said before, insecurity, anything can happen. So they should have made some allowance, at least reduce it by 1 or 2 percentage points, and brought it down to about 1.6, because anything can happen. Right now, we have a lot of international things happening.
If you don't mind, just hold your thoughts. We'll just go on a quick break. We'll come back and pick it up from where you left.
No problem.
Please stay with us. Welcome back. We're still discussing the approval of the medium-term expenditure framework by the Senate, and we're looking at how all of the parameters and some of the parameters that the legislators put out there could have been changed. I mean, Aliyu, we're talking earlier about what the legislators cited. I mean, global events, particularly the Middle East, in the Middle East and Europe. And my question to you was, is it not possible to plan? I mean, look at some of this, use the local parameters to determine how our economy is going to look, meaning going forward.
Yeah.
Is it that nothing happens locally that affects our economy?
I think that is far from the truth, because we also have to look at historical figures and historical happenings in the Nigerian economy. You can't be so confident in our security infrastructure, let the truth be told, and think that, okay, apart from security, there are mishaps that can come up, busting of pipes, underproduction, servicing of production pipes, so on and so forth. So you can't say throughout the whole year the production will remain at 1.8 million barrels. You have to be very conservative and make allowances for disruptions. Nothing is certain, especially not the local economy anyway. So at least there should be some allowance in case of any disruption, which could be security or even breakdown of machinery that could affect production, or natural factors, weather, so on and so forth. So they should have made some allowances and brought it down to, at least 1.6.
I like the fact that you brought in weather. Nigeria's weather conditions and climate such that it's somewhat stable. So there are very few people who even consider Nigeria's climate as an issue that should be considered when you're looking at planning expenditure and revenue for the country.
You see, no matter how stable the Nigerian economy is, you're dealing with the climate you're dealing with machinery. Whether it's very hot, very cold, rainy, there is always the possibility of a machinery breaking down and affecting production. And this has happened in the past, or servicing of machineries. So you can't just say that a machinery will keep producing 100% for the year. You can't say that. You always have to make provisions for or to accommodate, unexpected circumstances.
Okay, let's leave that and come back to the things that have been projected. Given the projected GDP growth rate of 4.68% in 2026, rising to 7.9% in 2028, do you think these targets are achievable?
It's achievable, but are we on that path? I don't think so, because we are not really investing a lot in production. Remember, GDP is the total number of goods and services produced in the country. And I don't see us, I think we're being too ambitious at 7%. If you look at historical figures, we've been moving between 3 and 4%, at most 5%, but I don't see any indices in the budget or any stimulants that can tell me that there's going to be a major growth in the economy, especially when we're not catering for agriculture and manufacturing, which is what is going to move us forward.
When you even look at it from that side, I'm seeing that in this document there's going to be fresh borrowings of about 18 trillion naira.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, would that make any difference in, maybe that's what will make the difference in the growth rate of the GDP? If 18 trillion naira is brought in and sunk into the Nigerian economy, maybe that will make a difference.
Well, so far that has not been the case. We have been borrowing in previous years, and that has not led to growth. And don't forget, if you borrow, you're also going to have to pay back. You're borrowing in one hand, and your debt service is going to increase. For example, now we are paying about 15 trillion. About 30% of the budget is going to be used to pay back loans. So that's not necessarily a good thing. And what is this borrowing going to be used for? I have not seen specifics, but I have not seen any ambitious investment in the real sector, manufacturing to create jobs, agriculture, solid minerals, so on and so forth. I've not really seen. So I think that's a very, very ambitious figure to have, because given historical data, I've not seen anything that is being done too differently.
Okay.
Let the truth be told.
Let the truth be told.
Yeah.
But let's look at this matter. I mean, okay, so the president, for instance, tomorrow is going to be presenting the 2026 budget to the National Assembly. There are those who are concerned here that 2024 budget is still running.
Yeah.
A portion of the 2025 budget is still running as well. And we're going to present the 2026 budget proposal to the National Assembly. That means there are going to be 3 budgets running concurrently.
Yeah.
Where has that happened? I mean, Nigeria is always a first at a lot of things. But what does that say of the state of the management of the Nigerian economy?
I think we have to, first of all, ensure that there has to be a mandate that a budget has to be utilized, meaning at least 90% of the budget has to be achieved. If you don't, and then you're moving to another budget, and then you don't achieve that, and you're moving to the third one, I don't think is a very good thing. So for fiscal responsibility, I think we have to ensure, legislators, along with the executive, have to ensure, pass laws that at least 90% of the budget has to be achieved, because what then happens is that there are lots of projects that are not done, and either monies are being returned or monies are not utilized. And given the current rate of the economy, what we are seeing, food is, we're not really producing. We're still import dependent in terms of food. That's not a very good thing. We should be moving towards self-sufficiency right now in a lot of things.
Thank you so much, Mr. Aliyu Audu is an economist and vice president, Irish Nigeria Business Association. Thank you for coming in today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.